Today we're going to be making a subscribe button. I'm going to take you over the different Take over. Hey, what's happening, guys? Today we're going to be making a subscribe animation. I'm going to take you through every step of the way, including exporting it and reusing it in your own projects. So if you've been confused by Fusion, a lot of stuff doesn't make sense to you, this is a great place to start. It should answer most, if not all, of your questions. So with that, let's transition into Resolve. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is just open up Davinci Resolve and do my project settings. If I go down to this cogwheel, I can go ahead and set up my settings. So I have my resolution set to 1920 by 1080, that's great. I have my timeline frame rate set to 60. If you know what frame rate you want your project in, go ahead and set it to that. I just set it to 60 because at the end I'm going to be rendering this out. And if I don't know what I want to use this in, it's easier for Davinci Resolve to get rid of the extra frames than it is to add in frames later. So I'm going to go with a bigger frame rate so that I can scale it down later. All right, then I'm going to add in a new Fusion composition. To do that, I'm going to go up to my effects. I'm going to go over to effects here, and then I'm going to grab a Fusion composition and just drag it onto my timeline. By default, it's going to be 5 seconds, that's fine. To get rid of this extra space, I'm just going to click and hit backspace. Now with my playhead over the Fusion composition, I can go over to the Fusion page. All right, now I'm in Fusion. And I can get rid of this extra stuff I don't need. I don't need the effects library, so I can close that. Your inspector might be larger. If I click this drop down, it'll make it larger, but I want more working space, so I'm going to leave it small. First thing we need to do is set up our project. Now, by default, anything that we plug into this media out is going to size our project. We want it to be 1920 by 1080. To do that, we're going to use a background. So I'm going to go click background, bring it down, and just hook it into this input. Now it's black by default. I'm just going to turn down the alpha to make it transparent. Okay, now that we have that set up, we can go ahead and make our play button. What I'm going to do for that is I'm going to grab a red background. So just grab another background. Now by default, since I had that other background selected and click that, it's going to merge them together. That's fine, but if I don't want them merged together, I can just double click anywhere out here and then it will drop. So double click and then add in a background. So I'm going to change this one to red. I can change it here, or I can just click on this and change it. I like this red, so I'm going to go with this. All right, and if I want to view anything, all I need to do is drag it up to the viewer. So I'm going to drag this red background up to my left viewer, and you can tell by the little dot, this is in the left viewer. My media out, which is going to be everything that I plug into it, is going to be on my right viewer. Now it's red, that's fine. We need to make it a little red square. To do that, I'm going to add in this mask. Here's a rectangle mask. With it highlighted, I can just click this and it'll already be in. I can resize it. I wanted to make it a square though, so I'm going to go over to the inspector, right click on width, go to expression, and then under expression, I'm just going to drag this plus sign over to the height. Now that I have that, I can move my height and width together. Now it's not square yet, so I'm going to add in a few more things to this equation. To do that, I'm going to times it by 1080 divided by 1920. Now I have a square. Anytime I move this height, the width will move proportionally with it. So that's a start. I don't want these jagged edges though. I want a little bit of radius on it, so I'm going to go this corner radius and just move it to about 0.3. So that's looking pretty good. I need to position this though. So what I can do is I can go ahead and drag this down and resize. And what I want for size is probably around 0.18. So I'm just going to go ahead and type that in. And I'm going to find some good coordinates. I'm going to go ahead and go with rounded values because it'll just help later on. So let's go with 0.15 and 0.18. Okay, now it's in position. I can go ahead and link these two together. To merge them, I can just go here and grab a merge. Now that I have that, I can drag this. And if I hold shift over the line, I can just drag and drop it on there. Now I can go ahead and plug this into the top. Now backgrounds are always going to go on the yellow line, foregrounds are always going to go on the green. So whatever's in the green input is going to be what's on top. So the next thing we need to add is a triangle. Now there's a couple ways I can do it. I could just grab a polyline and draw a triangle, but I'm going to use one specifically called triangle. And the reason is it gives me specific points to locate stuff. So I'm going to hit Control Space. It's going to bring up a little menu and I can just type in triangle. Now the triangle is just a shape. I need a color for it, so I'm going to grab in a background and I'm going to change this background to white. Now I can just grab my triangle, plug it in, and if I bring this up to the viewer, we have this. Now I have to decide where I want this to merge in. I could just merge this in on the line, but I really want the triangle and the square to move together. So I'm going to go ahead and merge it here. And I can grab a merge node, or I can just grab these outputs and put them together. I'm just going to move this over to clean it up. Now this is way too big, but we can click on this triangle and move the points. So I can move the points here, or I can put specific locations on these points here. Let's just get it close. So now I can put in exact locations to make it look a little bit better. So that looks pretty good. I might move over the rectangle a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and go with that. All right, so looking good. Now we're going to animate this. So to animate this, I'm going to use a transform. That's just used for moving things and scaling it up and down. So I'm going to click on this merge, Control Space, and go ahead and add in a transform. Always check your nodes, make sure they're connected. They might just be sitting on top of the line and not actually connected to anything. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do with this transform is move the pivot point so it scales at this point and not in the center. So click on the transform, go over to your pivot and just move it to the side. It'll be this little green X. So I'm going to move this down to the center of the play button. Now if I resize it, it'll resize off of that position and not the center. Be careful when resizing with a transform. If I make this really big, you'll notice that edge starts getting really blurry and I'll start actually getting pixelated. The reason is this is just resizing an image. If I actually need to resize this and keep the edges sharp, I need to go back to my rectangle, and if I move that up, it'll actually scale and keep a nice clean edge. So only use transforms to move things around after you have them roughly where you want. So what I want this to do is I want this to come in and do a little bounce. The easiest way to do that is to add in a couple keyframes and then use the spline editor. So I'm going to go back to the beginning. At frame 0, I'm going to add in a keyframe on this transform. So I'm going to go over to my inspector. I'm going to click on the keyframe for size. Once it's red, you know there's a keyframe there. I'm going to go 1 second in, so to frame 60, and add in another keyframe. Click again, add in a keyframe. Now I want this to end at 1, and I want it to be 0 at frame 0. You see this little arrow here? I can go back to any previous keyframe. So if I click that, it'll take me back to frame 0. And now frame 0, I want it to be 0. So type in 0, and this is going to animate from 0 to 1 over the course of 1 second. So not super exciting. Here's where the spline editor comes in. So if I go up to my spline, click that. Now I need to select my node. Now I need to select what attributes I want. Now if you're seeing a bunch of nodes here, go ahead and click on these 3 dots and make sure you have show only selected. If you have that turned off, every node that has a keyframe on it will show up in this list. And it can get confusing when you have a lot of nodes with lots of keyframes. So I like to keep that on, so I'm just working on the one that I want. So go ahead and click on the transform. I'll go ahead and click on zoom to fit. Okay, now that I have that fit, I'm going to highlight both of them, and then I'm going to hit S to make them smooth. And I want this to start off fast, and I want it to slow down as it gets to the end. So I'm going to grab this handle and I'm going to hold Alt. What Alt does, it just means I can't move it up and down. I'm just going to drag it this way. So now when I play it, it'll play quicker when it comes in, but I want a little bounce to it, so I'm going to add in some keyframes. I can just click on this line and add in a few. So let's make it bigger, then it gets a little smaller, and then a little bigger, and then kind of dies down. I can select these keyframes, hit S to smooth them, and now we get an animation like this. Nice little bounce to it. So now we're going to make the white rectangle that'll slide out behind this play button with all our icons and the text on it. So I'm just going to copy and paste this rectangle and this background. Control C and Control V. Make sure you don't have anything selected so it doesn't merge. Now I'm going to change a few things. I'm on this triangle, click on it. I'm going to get rid of this expression. I'm also probably going to make it a little bit smaller. So I want my height to be maybe 0.17. And then I want my width to be much larger. Let's say 0.5 for now. And I'm going to move it over. Let's say 0.4 is where I want it to land. I also need to change the color. So on this background, I'm going to make it white. And now I need to join this. Now I want everything to have that bounce animation. So I need to add this in before this transform. So I'm going to move everything up, and then I'm going to attach this down underneath the merge. Now you notice the white's on top of the red. Here's where we can switch stuff. So go ahead and click on this merge and hit Control T. All right, now we have everything lined up where we want it. I'm going to add in a few keyframes for this to slide out. So right after the bounce, I want this to start sliding. So let's say frame 65, and then I want it to end by maybe frame 110. So let's start at frame 110. So I'm going to select this rectangle, and I'm going to add in a keyframe on the center position. Then I'm going to go back to frame 65, and I'm going to move it back. That's good, but you notice that we have it peeking out over here, and we don't want it visible. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in an extra mask. So go ahead and move this rectangle up, and we're going to add in another rectangle. Actually, just click on this rectangle and then click another rectangle mask. So now we're going to grab this. It's adding in more white. That's not what we want. So what we can do is we can change this from merge to subtract. Now I'm going to move it into position. So now nothing will show up unless it's past this point. So let's go ahead and look at that. There we go. That's looking pretty good. It's a little stiff, so let's change the animation on the spline editor. So click the rectangle, click on spline, go ahead and select the rectangle, zoom to fit, select everything and press S. And that looks pretty nice. I don't think I'm going to change anything else on that, but feel free to do it however you want. So now we have our red play button and our white rectangle. So now we need to add in the text and the icons. So I want everything to go in on that white rectangle before it gets to the transform. So I'm just going to make some space here. Then everything's going to plug in here, flow into this transform where we have this little bouncing motion, and then everything will be set. So I'm going to add in a text, and I can go ahead and add that in. Now by default, it's always going to put the merge on the right hand side, but I'm just going to move it over. Generally speaking, you're going from left to right with this type of flow, but as long as you know which way your arrows are going, you're fine. For my text, I just want to type in subscribe. and then I'm just going to move it into position. It's white, which isn't that helpful, so I'm going to change the color. Let's go ahead and use the same red. And then on this layout tab, I can actually put in the position I want. So let's go ahead and put in some actual rounded numbers. I think 0.17 is where everything landed there, so I'm going to use 0.17 on the Y, 0.33 on the X. All right, we have that set. Now I need to add in my icons. So I can go over to my media pool, and I have this bell and I have this thumbs up. Now you can't see the thumbs up because it's black. I'll show you how to change the color on that. I got these from Pixabay. It's a great free resource. You don't have to use attribution or anything. It's just free stuff you can use. You could just grab these from Google, but just to be safe with copyright, I grabbed them from Pixabay. Pexels is another great one to use. So I'm just going to drag these down to my work area and then close my media pool. All right, I don't know which one is which, so I'm just going to drag one to the viewer. There's my bell. So I can click on it and I can hit F2 to rename it so I can find it easier. So hit F2. I'm going to do the same over here. And I can do that with any of my nodes so that I don't lose track of anything. Another thing you can do is add in an underlay. So if I hit Control Space, I can add in an underlay, and I can rename that too. And then if I take this underlay and I resize it, anything in there will now move with this underlay. So I have this nice label and everything moves together so it doesn't get lost. All right, now I can add in my bell and my thumbs up. And I'm just going to rearrange this so it makes a little more sense. I'm going to move the text over here, and then I'm going to add in the thumbs up and the bell. Now you notice that the thumbs up and the bell are way too big. We can resize those with a transform. So go ahead and add in a transform. Go ahead and resize them and position them. Okay, so I've positioned everything. Those are my numbers. I just rounded them off, made them easy to remember. Now we should have everything pretty much set up. Let's go ahead and look at it. All right, so we have everything in position, but you'll notice that's not moving with this white rectangle. Problem is we put our animation on the rectangle and we need to move everything together. So we're going to need to add in a transform and remove the keyframes from the rectangle. I did this on purpose. I didn't get lost. It's for your benefit. So go over to your rectangle and we're going to remove the keyframes. I got this little arrow and it's just going to take me to the next keyframe. I'm going to remove the first keyframe first. So not the one at 110, go to the one at 65. 65, I'm just going to click the diamond to remove the keyframe. And the reason I did that is because I want this to end in this position. If I had removed the other one first, it would have left me back here, and that's not where I want to be. So now I can go back to the frame 110, remove the keyframe. Now everything's in the position I want it to be in, and I can just add in a transform and animate it that way. So on this merge, click on it, hit Control Space, add transform. Now we're already on frame 110, so I'm just going to add in the keyframe. All right, now we have that keyframe. Now I can go to frame 65 and move it. So it's frame 65, I'm just going to move this back, and let's just call it 0. Now we have a second problem, because remember we had that mask? Now that mask is being moved with the transform. So we need to find a new position for that mask. So I'm going to click on this rectangle, which was our mask, and I'm going to hold Shift and drag it off. We're going to add it after the transform because we don't want it moving with the transform. We have everything moving the way we want it to. We want this mask to stay put. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a matte control. And then I'm just going to hold Shift and go over this line. Once you see a solid line, I can just drop it and you can see it's connected. I'm going to add in my mask. Now what this matte control is going to do, it's going to let me add in this mask later down the line than I normally would. Normally we'd need to put it on that background, but since we want it later on affecting that background, we can use this matte control to put it on later. So now I have it in the right location. It's not affecting anything yet. And that's because with the matte control, I also need a foreground element. So to get it to tell it where I want this taking place, I want it to be affecting the area where this red play button is. So I need to grab something before this transform. So I could grab it here or I could grab it after this merge. Either of these locations will work. And I'm just going to grab it and plug it into the foreground. Now to clean this up a little bit, I can hold Alt and click on the line and I'll add in a little joint. This joint will just help keep things a little bit cleaner. Now let's check our animation. All right, Resolve is getting a little bit slow, but it's there. That's exactly what we want. You may have noticed a little something as it was coming up. There's a little white there. That means our mask is not quite big enough. It's an easy fix. Just click on this rectangle for your mask and just resize it. The other thing we want to avoid though, once we resize it and now it's sticking out too far, we'll just scoot it back. All right, now it's pretty much perfect and we can just move on to the next step. So the next animation I want a little mouse clicker to come up and click on each one of these. So we're going to need to resize both these and we're also going to add in a little mouse. I don't have a mouse icon, so we're just going to make one from scratch. Since I want the mouse over top of everything, I'm going to merge it in on this line further down. So I'm just going to give myself some space and we're going to plug it in right around here. So I'm going to grab this polygon and then I need a background to give it some color. So I'm going to change this background to white. I'm going to plug it in and just draw a mouse shape. Let's bring it up in the second viewer. Now I can click on this polygon and start drawing. And I'm just going to click for my locations. If you click and hold, you will get rounded edges. I don't want that. I just want a basic mouse. Something like that should work. So now I need to add it in, so I'm just going to drag it down. Now I could drag that all the way back there to merge it in, but I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to grab a merge node, drag it on, and then connect it. Now there's a couple things here. First, we're going to need to animate it, so we're going to need a transform. It also doesn't stand out too well. So to fix that, I'm going to add in a drop shadow. So right after my background, click on the background, control space, drop shadow. There's a few things I like to do with the drop shadow. I like to increase the strength, turn down the blur, and turn down the drop distance. Something right like that looks pretty good. All right, now we need to animate this. So at 110, our animation is done. So let's give it a few more frames. Let's say start at 120. I want this to start off the screen, come up, click on this, come over, click on this, and then go off. So I'm gonna have to animate a few things, and then I'm gonna have to pause it and then keep going. So let's start at 120. This transform, I'm going to add in a keyframe. And then I'm going to move it into the position I want. So say 0.38 is where I want it, and I want it down off the screen, 0.25. So then it's going to take, say, 15 frames to come up, and we'll make that 0.45. Come up, 15 frames. Let's have it pause for 10. Go ahead and add in a keyframe. It'll only add in a keyframe automatically if you move something. Since we're not moving, we need to add in that keyframe. So it'll come up, it'll pause. Let's go another 10. Move it over, another 10, add keyframe, 10, move it over, 10, add a keyframe, and then let's do 15 and it'll come off. So 0.25. All right, let's take a look at that. All right, that's looking pretty good. One thing that we can add to this to make it a little bit more interesting is to go to the spline editor. So I'm gonna click on that. Let's go to spline, grab everything and just hit S to smooth. Now it looks a little more natural. If it looks like it's too much, you can always click on any of these points and just smooth out some of the handles on it. But I personally like the wobble a little bit. All right, next step is to animate this. While the mouse is over it, we need to animate them to make it look like they're being clicked. So let's go back to our text and find out where that first click happens. Comes up, so it starts moving off frame 45, so between 135 and 145. I'm going to go to 135, and then I'm going to move 3 frames in. And I'm going to change the size. I'm going to go ahead and keyframe this, and then I'm going to move 3 more frames. And if you just want to move a frame at the time, you can use your arrow keys to move 1 frame. So hit the arrow key 3 times. I'm going to make this 0.07. I'm going to move 3 more frames and make it 0.08 again. So this will come up, it'll look like it clicks it, move on. Then we're going to do the same thing to the thumbs up and the bell. All right, let's check out a full animation. All right, we're almost there. The next thing we need to do is we're gonna change the colors of these, and we're also gonna change subscribe to subscribed. So let's go back, let's click on our text, and where the button gets pushed at its lowest moment, I'm gonna change that. That's where I want it to switch words. So what I can do with that is just keyframe it. I'm gonna say subscribe, and then by the time it comes back up, I want to say subscribe. So I'm gonna change both the color and the text on that. So I'm gonna go ahead and click a keyframe on the color, and then move to this last keyframe, and we're going to change the color in the text. The text will read subscribed, and we'll change the color to like a gray. Now one issue we're going to fix is we're just going to have to fix the position a little bit. So go ahead and go to layout, and we can go ahead and scoot things over as we need. So maybe this rectangle needs to get a little bit longer. Since we don't have keyframes on any of those positions, it's not going to affect anything. So it's all moved over, it's all good to go. The only thing that we might need to change is where this arrow ends up. We can move the keyframes, but I'm lazy, so I'm just gonna move the whole thing over a little bit. So I'm gonna go over to this transform, and I'm just gonna move it right there. Now everything's functioning the way we want it to. We have clicks, we have subscribe to subscribe. Let's change the icon colors. So to do this, I'm going to use a background, and I'm going to use these shapes as a mask. So add in a background, disconnect this, and then put this in as a mask to the background. Now there is one issue with this, and that is, if you notice, it cuts off the image for some reason. The way to get around that is to resize this image. So I'm going to add in a resize. Now the resize will stretch it out to 1920 by 1080, and it'll fill it in, but you can see that it's now oblong, it doesn't look right. What we're going to do is add in an extra transform to compensate for that. So under this background, go ahead and add in another transform. Go ahead and unclick use size and aspect. Now we can use these independently. So I'm going to hook this in, And the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go on to our original transform and just move it into the correct position. And then on this added transform, we're going to change the aspect of it. And we can mess with the position as needed. The reason I don't want to do anything else but rescale it in that second transform is we have all the animation information on this transform. So I don't want anything to happen to that one. All right, go ahead and do the same thing for the bell. And if you want, you could always just copy and paste these. Okay, and now that we have these backgrounds in there, we can do the exact same thing as we did with our text. So the easiest thing to do is click on this transform, find our center keyframe, which is the lowest point. Go ahead and keyframe the color, and then move to the next keyframe and change the color. Let's make it blue in this case, some sort of blue. And then do the same thing with the bell. All right, last thing before we go, we're going to add in some lines. Some nice little click lines to the bell. I'm going to put that over top of everything. It's pretty easy. As you might guess, for color, we're going to use a background, and then we're going to use a polyline, not to draw a shape, but just to draw a line. So I'm going to go ahead and draw just a line, 2 points, maybe straighten it a little bit. Let's merge it in so we can see what's going on. Click on your polyline, and then just increase this border width. Let's leave it at 0.01, and we can go to the background, change the color. If we want, we can grab this color picker and make it the same color as the bell. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in what's called a duplicate node. Click on the background, and with this, I'm just going to make lines going all the way around the bell. So I want 6 copies. I want them going all the way around. 360 divided by 6 gives me 60 degrees. Now they're not going around the bell, they are going around. So I just need to change the pivot. Again, move this pivot off. Go ahead and grab the pivot, move it over the bell. And now we have these lines. Now we need to animate them. So I'm going to animate them with the click. So I'm going to find my lowest position there, that middle keyframe. I'm going to go back to my polygon. This length is what we're going to animate. So I'm going to add in a keyframe. I'm actually going to move this all the way down. And let's say 5 keyframes. And then I'm going to move that all the way up. Then I'm going to add in a keyframe to the position, move 5 more keyframes, and then I'm going to move that position. So now we have this nice line animation. Now, we don't want little dots hanging around there. So what we can do is we can go to this merge, and we can control the blend. So click on your merge. We're going to add in a keyframe at 1 right there. I'm going to move 1 frame back and move it all the way down. So now it'll come on, and then I'm going to go to the end, keyframe the blend again, go 1 keyframe after, and move the blend down. And now we're done with the animating. All right, now you have a sweet little animation. Now, unfortunately, there's no way to add audio into a Fusion composition, so you are going to have to go back to this edit page, and we're going to have to bring in some sound effects. I recommend freesound.org. It's a great place to find sound effects. Just make sure that you click on this Creative Commons. That way you don't have to worry about any licensing issues. All right, so for the final composition, I just added in some sound effects, a little water drop, a little whoosh, some mouse clicks. So make sure you save everything. Now we're going to render this out. And there's a few reasons we want to do that. One, we want to be able to reuse this, and you can't put Fusion compositions in the power bin. It doesn't accept compound clips or Fusion compositions. Find power bins, make sure you go up to View, and make sure you have Show Power Bins. Power bins are just an easy way to use the same thing between different projects. You can save stuff in there, and it makes it really easy to access if you want to use it again. The other reason is that we don't want a Fusion composition being processed every single time that we do this. Once we have it the way we want, we can render it, and then it's a lot easier to use in Davinci Resolve. So what I'm going to do is highlight everything. I'm going to hold the Alt key and drag, and this is just going to make a copy of everything. So once I have a copy, once I have it all highlighted, I can right click, go to New Compound Clip, and that's just going to pack everything together, and then I'm going to render this out. So I'm going to click on the front of it, I'm going to hit I on the keyboard, I'm going to go to the end, hit O, and that'll set an in and an out point, and that's what we're going to render. Go over to the Deliver tab, and then we're going to set up our project. Give it a name, choose a location to save it to, and then for our format, we're going to use QuickTime, GoPro Cineform, RGB 16, and then make sure we have Export Alpha. If we don't, you're just going to have a black background that's going to sit over top of your clip, and it's not going to help you out. Go ahead and add that to the render queue. I already have one, so I'm just going to replace it, and then you just hit render. Once you have it rendered, go ahead and right click in your media pool, go down to Import Media, go ahead and bring yours in. Now I have a clip that I can just drag and drop on top of any footage I want. So drag it and drop it like so. You now have a slick animation that you can reuse whenever you want. If I want to reuse it in different projects, I can just drag and drop it right into my power bin. And then anytime I go into my power bin, I have it right there. If you'd just like to pick this up as an animation already made, I have it on my Buy Me a Coffee page. You can go there and just download it. In it, I have the MOV, I have the setting file that you can just drag and drop right into Fusion, and I have it set as a comp. However you want to use it, That's fine. I hope this was helpful, and if it was, hit that subscribe button. Happy dabbling, and we'll see you next time. Hey, what's happening, every guy? Every guy? Every guy? What? What does that even mean?